All right. And I also have I've scheduled all the slides to go up onto the chat on Twitter at the same time.
Okay.
And I have my colleagues in our group there are going to help moderate that chat. So I shouldn't have to moderate 2 chats at once. That was one of my fears when I initially set this up. I was like, well, I don't want to moderate 2 chats, at the same time, because that'll just get crazy. Not that my chat is ever that active usually on Twitch, but it could be, especially once I get
That's
into
totally fair.
just chatting. No. So I got my colleagues looking out, and they'll stop in as well.
Yeah, that'd be great, especially.
So I know there's a lot of teachers on Twitter, but they're not always on Twitch for sure.
Isn't that kind of crazy that we have, it's not even just teachers or educators, but we've kind of like, since COVID, have brought in so much of the educational and a lot of the STEM field onto these online platforms. And it's become so ubiquitous that now when you talk to someone about like Microsoft Teams or like WebEx or Discord or things like that, these teachers are like coming up with some new ideas to educate students. Like I find that so fascinating. I'm kind of jealous that I'm not kind of doing that right now, but I'm kind of doing, we're kind of doing it informally right here, like, Twitch and everything. But obviously, like, I'm not here with a syllabus or or anything like that. So
yeah, and it's definitely an exciting time to be a teacher, no doubt. And I enjoy playing with tech. That's kind of one of the reasons I got into streaming. I kind of like seeing how things work and playing with technology. And so, I kind of like that aspect of it. And as a teacher, I like it too. I'm like, oh, what cool things can I do to make, class more interactive? And now that everything's online, that's even more so. So, so that's great. Well, Carla is there on the both chats. So thanks for being here. Ice Vertigo. Hello. By the way, I am Scott. I've been teaching for 18 years, and this year I'm teaching mainly 8th grade science again, with a high school lab class and a remedial science class in the high school. And Neuro, I'll let you introduce yourself as we get started.
Yeah, sure. I'm Neuro Fourier. I am a scicomm Twitch streamer. I'm also on Twitter, primarily those 2 platforms. I focus on neuro, medicine, health, global politics, and everything of the sort. My background is specifically right now what I do for work right now. So I am the global health director for the State Department's Bureau of Populations, Refugees, and Migration. And my portfolio primarily focuses on developing and implementing procedures and policies that are robust and sustainable for vulnerable migrants worldwide, in any sort of humanitarian crisis settings. My background obviously is in all sorts of basic medicine and also in health, public health, data science, and obviously international relations. So I kind of like span across, I kind of have a multi-headed person in that aspect, but in general, there's always an emphasis on ensuring sustainable health policies really for anyone, especially in these like dire times.
Right. And we're going to get into more the refugee and science communication part later in our chat. We're kind of doing a little transition between 3 topics here tonight. The first part of this, we're going to be talking about trauma, and particularly in the classroom, but in general, because trauma anywhere is just trauma. And so I kind of wanted to get into this myself because I have a curiosity about it as an educator as well. Hey, it's Jordan. What's up? Thanks for being here. So one of my former students is hanging out. So
Oh, nice.
Thanks for being
Are they
here.
getting extra
Always
credit?
good.
Are they getting extra credit for this?
Well, he former student. He's not a current student,
Okay.
so
Okay.
so
So no
so
extra
it's cool.
credit then.
So no extra credit, but I'll give you bonus points just the same because they mean nothing. So, the first question we're talking about here tonight. So, have you done trauma training at your school, and what are the benefits? I'll talk myself. I know, Neuro, you're not a teacher, so you can't really talk about this. I know on Twitter, some of my colleagues are going to be responding to this. We actually get training every year now, as far as mental health and trauma in particular now, and so this is kind of like where I started coming in for this, where I'm not an expert by any means, nor are you. So we can't speak as experts to this. I'm not in any way specifically trained as a trauma person or mental health. But as we know, teachers in a lot of different fields, you have to be trained, to deal with this and deal with trauma. And I know many refugees coming in are having to deal with trauma as well. In fact, at our school we get refugees, and this is where the crossover comes in. How as teachers, when we get any student that has trauma, how we deal with that. So
Okay.
And I'm sure there's specific programs set up for refugees to deal with trauma. Neuro, maybe you have something about that. Is there training or like programs for refugees to get that treatment?
So I could speak broadly in terms of like, so I was one of the few people who worked on um developing these like programs for specifically with, and it's part of the sustainable development goals that the United Nations had set forward for a lot of these vulnerable populations. And one of the key populations that we work with is maternal health care and children. They are one of the more vulnerable populations that we want to make sure that are taken care of, especially in a lot of these humanitarian crisis settings. A lot of these children and mothers are separated, or the children are separated and they're traveling by their own, and all these different situations. So we instituted a program to essentially ensure that psychosocial support and that we are addressing signs of trauma is addressed from the get-go, and obviously that there is consistent, persistent resources for a lot of these vulnerable populations worldwide in all of these different settings, because it varies worldwide and wherever you go. And there's also has to be training in terms of cultural sensitivities as well, because not every single trauma training is applicable to every different type of populations. One could do different for refugee population in Uganda versus the Bangladesh Burma border or things like that. These are all different considerations we need to take into account. In terms of the domestic policy work, I've actually been working on a lot more of the COVID related trauma programs in terms of that. So that's been focusing on developing and understanding what trauma means in the context of a pandemic. So actually makes me great. It actually has me excited to hear that your school is doing trauma training right now on a yearly basis. And I think right now, more so than ever in this era of COVID, that we need to be much more vigilant about understanding trauma, and that it is essentially relative. It's one of those things that like trauma can be different for every person, can happen anytime, can happen anywhere, and that we need to be much more educated on all of that. And it's not even just staff in a school. It's very much like we need to have students, parents, and local organizations understand what that is. So it starts at home and school. So, but kind of in this context of COVID, we're working with kind of the local education program to figure out what's the best way to do it. And it seems like when you and I kind of were initially talking, it's like it seems like there's a lot more schools right now approaching trauma sensitivity training, and that's a lot of the principles and everything like that shared across the board, even in refugee situations. Like there's basic principles behind all of that that can be applied to any children, really, right? And so in terms of that, so since long answer to your question, yes, we do have programs for refugee populations, but I would say about 80% of a lot of training is about very similar, really.
Mhm.
Maybe even more so, because in general, like for children or any like anyone who's in the educational setting, there's like 4 or 5 basic principles we can all adhere to
Mhm.
ensure that we are much more aware about what causes trauma, how do we observe it, how do we address it, and how do we take it after we've addressed it.
Right. Carla had a good question, and I can relate to this. She says, I work on a military base, and we have a few counselors to help our students while parents deployed or just
Mhm.
moved to our base. Would this be considered trauma? Um, in some cases, yes. When I was in high school, was the first Gulf War, and I went to school in the Department of Defense dependent school. Um, for most of my schooling, and so I had classmates that had parents that were deployed, to the Middle East, to Iraq and Kuwait,
Mhm.
and there was. And I don't know how the adults dealt with it then, because I was just, I was still a kid. I was in high school, but I'm sure that they were very attuned to the kids, but I don't think in the 90s that there is that the same emphasis that there is now on trauma. But I don't know,
Mhm.
because I was a kid then and I'm an adult now, so I don't know, maybe it's just my
Fair.
perspective now that I'm getting the training. But i think I don't think my teachers necessarily had that training any more than
Okay.
they might have had a meeting to be like, hey, these students have parents that are deployed, send them to the guidance office if they're having problems. But so
Yeah, yeah.
so
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, my question to you then is, so I'm going to put on my I'm going to put on my doctor hat right now.
Okay.
So what do you define as trauma, really, like in this case scenario?
um in this case, anytime there is, especially it becomes a biological component of who you are, or it affects you such that you can't regulate somehow like you used to, in kind of an
Okay.
extreme way. And it's not momentary. It's more of a kind of like a chronic condition. Like, it's not just going to
Hmm.
go away, right?
Sure.
um and that's my definition. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think there has to be some kind of biological component, as well as that mental health piece of it as well.
So I think you definitely touched on like the very critical portion of the fact that this is a chronic thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way I would define, so the way I always describe trauma in some of the trainings I've done is, so if you were to look at, so let's look at an adult, is
Mm-hmm.
let's imagine them as a cup, regular cup, right? And the amount of stress slash trauma is filling up in their cup. Now, obviously, in a regular size cup, let's say this bottle right here, they could probably fill up they could take up a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
They have built up resilience over the years. They're much more in tune with their emotions and stuff like that. But then when you take into a situation where let's just take, for example, this mug is smaller. It is kind of smaller, but this is a child. It's much smaller. Their capacity to actually handle traumatic events or stress. And these events can also mean different things, right? It could be in a situation like Carla mentioned, where parents are deployed or moved to a base where there is a disruption to their normalcy in life. Um, that could be trauma
Mm-hmm.
for that child. But the thing is that with trauma is that not all events are trauma, not all stressors are trauma, but it can't. But there is always a possibility that it could be, um, and
Mm-hmm.
it's the responsibility of uh, usually the people or the caretakers or its faculty or anyone who's nearby. A lot of the folks who the students or anywhere like that to notice these signs where the child or the student exhibits certain behaviors where obviously there does need to be intervention, or even for that fact, make sure that we intervene, be proactive, and addressing it from the get go. So in a situation like in the base, right, where Jimmy's parents are leaving that day, they're deploying that day. I'm just taking an
Yeah.
example, and that day you go and talk to Jimmy and like, hey Jimmy, like let's go to my room and let's talk about this and things like that. That's what so that right there is part of the preventative measure. What you're doing is making sure that you're creating the safe space for that individual for that student to talk
Right.
and to understand that they have the venue to express themselves and to be able to talk through that situation. And you're because the thing is that what people tend to not understand about a lot of these trauma trainings is that the first 24 hours after the event is absolutely the most critical.
Hmm.
Absolutely the most critical, because what ends up happening for a lot of folks is that, and I say folks as in like not students but adults, after the first
Right.
24 hours, you're more likely to compartmentalize a lot of those events and you shove it towards the back and you say, you know what, I'm fine. It's not a big deal anymore. Sometimes it is. You're fine. You go and do your thing, but sometimes it's not, and that is where it can manifest itself in a way that we start to see physiological signs, or we start to see stressors that we don't normally look for. So
Right. And I think about a lot of times in the military when it wasn't, I don't know if it was a traumatic event for me, but for a lot of small kids, moving, can be,
absolutely,
a big thing. And that's not just, a 1 day thing. There's like a
mm-hmm.
build up to that move, and then you move to another country, and then you might have that culture shock as well.
Yeah,
And there's a lot that goes into that. And that's a controlled move with a support system. I think of like,
mm-hmm.
refugees. That's, a whole nother thing where you might not have a support system at all, and
Yeah,
it's much more haphazard. And at least when you're moving with the military, there's a home when you get there.
mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
when there's a job when you get there. So it's,
Yeah.
one's definitely more traumatic than the other, but like you said, depending on the individual, and the age and things like that, there could be a certain level of trauma, if I'm not
Yeah.
wrong,
And the
involved.
thing is that with students, um, I would say actually any student up to the age of like through college, it's like that socialization aspects of the development is actually the most critical portion of like how they handle stressors in life. There's such thing as healthy stress versus unhealthy stress, and part of learning that is through socialization and being able to have intimacy and to be able to talk and develop communication skills. A lot of these things like doesn't it's not even necessarily a physiological like risk that we're talking about. We're also talking about long-term social skill issues and mental health that we want to make sure that we're addressing over the long term. um,
Mm-hmm.
i think I think one of the many things that hopefully your training is also providing as well is understanding
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of these trauma trainings aren't necessarily for the, the students here and now, but it's also so that they can take with them that sense of security and that training and that support with them through the rest of their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me is like one of the biggest things that I think is missing with a lot of key messages with trauma training in an educational aspect.
Yeah. So the one of the things we're talking about now over on Twitter, how can teachers be supportive of students,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that and be sensitive of trauma. And I
Mm-hmm.
have, one of the a few things that, from my district. One is like, reframing, student behavior, right? So if something happens, don't take it personally, as a teacher, and try to have kids do positive self-talk, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and speak good. Have some predictability and routines. I find that good for all students. to not
Mhm.
surprise them all the time, but have, good routines, because it helps
Mhm.
all kinds of students with different, backgrounds come into a school and know what to expect, and be able to
Yeah.
operate better. And a lot of these, I find, I'm like, this is good for every student, not just trauma students, because it's like praise publicly but criticize
Yeah.
privately. I'm like, that's something you usually do in general as a good
Mhm.
practice. Um, and, also have a space to kind of allow, that comfort for the student that might be experiencing trauma, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and something I've learned as an educator in 18 years, I've become and being married, becoming a much better listener,
Yeah.
pays
Active
huge
listening.
dividends. You don't have to say anything other than just, mm-hmm, yes, yes, I hear you, and just listen, um, and go from there. I mean, listening is, I think, as we sit here and talk a lot, hopefully a lot of people are listening as well. Um,
Sure.
Being a good listener, for me at
Yeah.
least, was challenging, and I had a few students that were having some problems, and I really had to force myself to listen to what they were saying, and
Mhm.
understand where they were coming from, and make sure I knew where to send them to get help if they needed it, and also how to frame when
Yeah.
I'm talking to their parents, or to other stakeholders in the school, what it is that I'm hearing, you know,
Yeah.
um, which for me it wasn't easy. I just have a background in science, not in having good listening skills. So, but and it took a lot of time to do that. But I think it goes a really long way.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think I learned is, as much as teachers want to be that hero and want to be that person that solves a student's problem, whatever they're going through, it's not always going to be you. You're going to be the doing the right thing when you send them to the right place to get the care that they do need, especially if it's not something that you can personally provide or should try to provide. And
Mhm.
that goes for any kind of student, mental health issues, that is, I can at least now quickly tell when it's beyond just me listening. It's something that really needs to go to the next level. um,
Mhm.
so I don't know if you wanted to speak on that and how to support people with trauma that you know of, or I don't think I have a
Um,
unique experience here.
well, so I have a few. I mean, like I think one of the questions I actually want to just to kind of bring in some of the other portions of what I wanted to talk about. So trauma training is for students too. Absolutely.
Yep.
There's
Mm-hmm.
facets of the trauma training that you can implement within the student body, and the way you do it is through essentially training inadvertently when you do this, because when you're doing
Mm-hmm.
active listening, and a key thing is active listening, right? That you're listening and you're responding back in a way that they are communicating, and also being able to also just really like kind of guide them through, not teach, you guide
Mm-hmm.
students through understanding how to communicate. There's certain word choices as well, as when you start dealing with students who are having academic issues or having behavioral issues in the classroom. In the situation we had, so this was a local village in Rwanda, and there was a small refugee camp there. The program we had started from there was having some of the older kids who, by that time, they were pretty resilient. At that point, they grew up in this very harsh environment. They're pretty much just like they're good to go for the most part. These were like 14, 15-year olds. And so what we did was that we kind of trained them to kind of be essentially guided, like kind of like guiding lights for a lot of the younger students that were within that group, and to be kind of like the pillar for younger children to kind of like be able to talk to them, because sometimes they're not comfortable talking to strange adults or to the religious leaders or to the community leaders. It's understandable,
Mm-hmm.
but for them to talk with those younger children, the older children, it made a world of a difference. Now, obviously, the situation might be different in like the U.S. Canadian school system or European school system, but the kind of the same principle I guess applies here in the sense that we're not doing this trauma training to help to kind of like for us to help them in the immediate, but we're giving them the skills to manage these stressors in life. We're helping them to manage expectations. We're helping them to figure out what it is that I need to look for in order to know that I'm experiencing something that's not normal, and that I need to talk with someone who needs that help. It can help me in this case. I think one of your questions actually, Scott, was how do you? I think one of the questions was like, how do you just identify signs of trauma? Was
Yeah.
that one of the questions? Um, so that's a good one. That's a fantastic question because I know that we get that a lot. Um, so some of the more obvious ones are like the emotional ones, um, emotional, behavioral, and then academic performance, and you can usually spot those very easily. And then sometimes the less obvious ones are developmental milestones.
Mm-hmm.
If you know that, for example, a girl who misses her period, as an example, that's an example of a developmental milestones that could be a sign of trauma, because what we start to see is that trauma can manifest itself in a very unfortunate way within the human body, and that could be one of the reasons. We start to see toileting issues. So kids will urinate themselves or cannot have
Mm-hmm.
bladder issues, sleep appetite issues. Those are some of the bigger ones as well. Persistent, inconsistent tardiness. Um, Cooperation with other students. That's another big one right there. If they're the ones who are constantly picking fights with other students, or are not willing to work with them, or just not willing to engage with other students, that's a big sign as well. And then also the another big thing too is the parents' demeanor. The way and the thing is like you don't just observe your student, you observe the parent. You observe the parent, make sure that that there's not something off, or in this case, if they're overly aggressive, overly tough on their child, or anything of the sort, or the way they communicate is really
Mm-hmm.
gruff, and also, or if they're very distant, right? And we've seen some of those parents where they're just like, okay, Jimmy, just get your stuff. I'm gonna wait outside. I don't really care, and
Mm-hmm.
walk away. And we've seen situations like that. And there are different little. Those are some of the bigger red flags we can definitely, as educators, see as like the obvious signs of trauma. And just in general, like you know, I think you can gauge a general baseline. If it doesn't feel right, you can talk to your student. You can approach them and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like I noticed, like, you haven't been turning in your assignments, et cetera, et cetera. Is there something I can help you with? Like but the way I approached you right there wasn't that like I'm blaming you
Right.
about the situation. I'm coming here to help you. I'm coming here to help you, and I'm willing to listen to what you have to say. And that's an example of a key phrase there that can make a huge line of difference when you communicate with a student that could potentially have trauma, or it could be that student just simply forgot and they just didn't want to do the homework. But there's different venues that you can do to approach a lot of those situations. So those are kind of like the general idea behind how you can know the signs of trauma.
Yeah. And that's where I like, you know, the team that I work with at school, because
Mm-hmm.
we're really close, and it's a small school. Like, I know every eighth grader, and I see them again in the high school. So if there's a problem, we can recognize it pretty quickly, because we know the
Mm-hmm.
kids, we know the families, and if we notice something, we'll ask each other. We can easily, oh yeah, it's like that in my class too, and you start seeing trends.
Mm-hmm.
And kids often, when they come to our school from a larger school, realize they won't fall through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
We're on them pretty good. And I always I worry about kids in like bigger schools that don't have that necessarily that support structure,
Yeah.
where you know you're just a number, and if you're having a problem, there's counselor for 1,000 kids. How are you, and you might not be close to any of your teachers. And I think especially in situations like that, it is important for, as a teacher to be open, like you said, and be able to approach kids non-confrontationally, to see what you can do, if there's something that needs to be done. And I think most teachers are very attuned to that's something they need to do. Some, unfortunately are not. But I always feel the benefit of a smaller school. I grew up in a small school, and I teach in a smaller school. There is a benefit to that, and that's right. Kristen says she loves teams in the middle school. Yep, even larger schools, like my kids go to a larger school, but they have teams, so they move up grades together. So the teachers kind of all know, those kids. They know the families. And you can easily recognize when there's a problem, either whether it be trauma or other mental health issues. It's a great benefit for those kids. So, and there is this thing about you can become a trauma sensitive school. Now that we're talking like building wide. And there are some, things that, we mentioned about being, having that, it's basically from what I've read, it's that shared understanding of what trauma is, right? That its effects on learning and behavior. So, one of the things I had to learn as a teacher is behaviors, a kid's not a jerk just because he wants to be a jerk. It's usually coming from someplace. And you always want kids to feel safe. That's part of, being sensitive to this, and having having a holistic view, I guess, of feeling that everyone's kind of working together as a community to support, everybody's feeling of emotional well-being. And I think a lot of that comes down to a lot of the efforts in a lot of schools about, preventing bullying and supporting those with mental health needs in general. That if you have a school that's focused on those things, a lot of that of your other problems hopefully would kind of go down. I mean, honestly, one of the best parts about having a hybrid system right now is I've had to break up no fights yet this year. It's been great. That just comes with the territory. Usually with middle school, you get a couple of those, but you would think if you're supporting certain pieces of students' well-being, that their need to lash out would be decreased, or if they do, you can get them the support that they need, and not just shove them in suspension or something as a the go-to as far as discipline.
I mean, I think you hit it right on the dot with the whole holistic community-based approach that it's not necessarily just the educators we have to look at, right? Like a trauma-sensitive school, and I'm assuming this program is similar to what I'm looking at. It's like you're not just engaging the educators, but you're engaging the parents, having regular PTA meetings, having regular meetings with the parents. You are engaging with the community. So in a lower income setting, that school is engaged with Goodwill food banks, the lower income housing administrations, and religious networks in the area. Because obviously, like in a situation where if a school's not in a district that's not well funded, or the education system is not well funded, you're going to have to make sure that everyone pulls their weight to ensuring that the students are addressed, not just at school but outside. And I think most of everyone in chat, or anyone in your chat, can understand that trauma can happen at any time and anywhere. It doesn't have to be just in a school environment, and we need to be aware, understand that these things do happen. And another thing too, one of the things that I am a big champion of is ensuring wellness of staff as well. So any, cafeteria staff, the janitors, the administrative staff, the teaching staff, every single person is, well trained, well equipped, and obviously is supported as well, in this situation. Because if you are not supported, then it doesn't make you an effective person to handle a trauma situation.
Yep.
And that's something that I feel is very much like, we need to be louder on too.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that this year, every I think everyone on staff, the teachers I know, have been assigned someone from the uh, the the guidance office to be their,
Mhm.
uh, what they call it, their caretaker. So it's they want to make sure that you know that there is this person available in the school for you to go to if you're
Mhm.
having. So like the lady that's my caretaker, she brought me a little gift bag this week, just to say,
Yeah.
hey, I'm your caretaker, hello, and if you need anything, I'm here for you. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. And that's where it's coming from as far as supporting the staff.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I've had years where I don't know if it was trauma, but it was definitely like a not good level of stress, where
Sure.
you're losing sleep, and when you sleep you have nightmares about going into work, kind of thing. Or those things where you're like, man, if I just drove off the road right now, I wouldn't have to go to work.
Mhm.
Crazy ideas like that, and you're just like, I'm not in a good place. um, and so, as teachers, sometimes it's just kind of like, well, I just got to grin and bear it and get through it. It's part of life. But
Mm.
in reality, yeah, you think about it. If I wasn't, in my 20s at that point, I was, in my 50s, and maybe my heart wasn't in good health, it could have, been a lot worse. I wouldn't have been at work. I would have had, a lot more problems. So,
I
and
mean,
I
I
think
say
we're starting
this
to
with all my
understand that. I think as
yeah,
where we need that. Yeah, Kristen
yeah.
likes the idea of that caretaker. Yeah, uh, so it works out great. And Carla was talking about how she teaches a science class, not only digital citizenship, but comprehensive sex ed, to social emotional learning, growth mindset, and now she says she's gonna have to add this.
I think that's
you know.
fantastic. I mean, especially in this, and like I said, especially in the age of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and I say this as a physician as well, that there's just a lot more challenges that are going to come down the line, especially in the United States and actually worldwide in general. Like this isn't just applied to the United States, so apologies on that. But the idea is that like we need to be much more. Um, I think it's critical that we do teach the trauma mindset, and not necessarily trauma, but also managing stressors in life, having good stressors,
Mm-hmm.
understanding what a good stressor and a bad stressor is, right?
Right.
And understanding that chronic stress is not good for you. And I say this and I'm putting on my physician hat here, is that like, I see too many people who come in who, have stress themselves to the point where they induce themselves, irritable bowel syndrome or any of these other conditions that chronic conditions that they have come down to. There's been many studies that has been done that has shown that these persistent chronic stressors in life is not healthy in a long term, and your lifespan is significantly decreased, your quality of life is significantly decreased, your happiness is significantly decreased. And the thing is that it starts at school when you're
Mm-hmm.
young, when you start to teach the emotional intelligence, when you start to teach the communication skills and understanding cues and understanding what it is that we're thinking. Because a lot of times, for a lot of students, I'm saying anywhere like probably within the grade school era, you're still figuring out these emotions. Heck, you're still doing that through most of high school, right? I mean, it's like
Mm-hmm.
one of the most tumultuous times, because at that point you're just realizing, oh my god, I have hormones. How do I process all of this? What do I
Yep.
do with that?
Yep.
And the thing is that like what we're here to do is we're here to guide those students. We're here to guide them
Mm-hmm.
to figure out how to figure out that process. We're not telling them, we're not dictating anything. We're telling them how, we're guiding them to figure out what it is that they need to be doing to process all of these complex emotions and things like that. They're not easy. And part of that is going to help in the long term for them to process traumatic events in life that they or chronic stressors that they perceive in life. And we see a lot of that happening where we neglect those trainings, and what happens is that these students come to college, and I say this as someone who's taught several college courses for several years, is that these students just don't know how to they just don't see the chronic stressors that are in their life because they just haven't dealt with it, and they break down, they mentally
Mm-hmm.
break down, and they drop out of class and they drop out of college. And it's one of the and these are the things that we should be addressing way before they get into college, because at that point they're not around uh their normal networks, they're not with their parents, they're taking care of themselves for the most part. They're in control of their own destiny, and that's something that we have to think about, that we need to arm, and we need to make sure that it's sustainable. um I always stand by the four S's of trauma training. And it's something that I always push for whenever I talk about any of these kind of like in general uh, trauma things, is that you want to make sure that your students are in a safe,
Mm-hmm.
stable, and supportive and sustainable
Mm-hmm.
environment. Can they take that and take it with them for the rest of their lives? If your student is not able to take what you've taught them for that stuff through past that grade, then we only have ourselves to blame at that. And these are things we have to think a lot of. We have to think a lot of this as like a long-term investment every step along the way. And it might not be like a once a year thing where one year you'll teach a two student and then next year another person. It's something that, like, I'm kind of glad that you say this, where uh you guys are talking to each other throughout the different years of the student's life cycle. So it's not like you see the student and you never see them again. It's kind of cool that you guys kind of all talk to each other, and you're like, oh, Jimmy from I had him in seventh grade and now you have him for eighth grade. Here are things that I've observed and everything like that. And hopefully you can, kind of take the
Mm-hmm.
mantle and continue a lot of this like talk that we've had.
Yep. And
So,
it's, going back to me being an Army brat, um, I had no trouble transitioning to college, in part, I think, because I was already so used to moving,
hmm
and cultural differences and everything. It was just another step for me, whereas, I know other people that, I went, to school with, were a lot more their first time away from home kind of thing. And I also we have that, where I teach in a city school, and when we've gone on overnight field trips. These kids
hmm
had never been away overnight before, like
yeah,
out of state. A lot of them have been to their friend's house down the street or whatever, but
hmm
the furthest they go from home is the mall.
yeah,
And that's why it's unfortunate, like right now, with COVID, you can't give these kids those experiences, especially I think when they're needed to. We're in a global society, but I can't get these kids outside of their small little world, let alone take them,
yeah,
to a hotel. You should have seen these kids the one trip, what they got, the hair dryers in the hotel. They're like, oh my God, there's a hair dryer in here. Look at this. It's like, yep. you know, they never, but that's the fun thing. And it's one of those things where, like, well, it's not the content that you're trying to teach these kids. It's that experience. Like you said, you got to kind of get some of that stress out of the way when they're young, so when they go to college, it's not their first time away from wherever they were, and then they freak out
hmm
and they have to return. So it's all those
yeah,
little things, that happen as you get older, that you know education in schools is not just about teaching to the test, and there's all those other pieces
yeah,
that are more important. Those communication skills. There's those teaching about how you interact with others and collaboration and things like that aren't
Yeah.
going to be on your state assessment. They'll be on the life
And it's
assessment.
it's not an easy subject to really teach, right?
Right.
And that's the thing, is that we guide students through these situations, because it's not like you can teach a student to be emotionally intelligent. Just do it, right? Like you can't simply just flip the switch on. But what you do is that you foster that positive feedback, and when you see, like, there is positive behavior, that you're reinforcing that, and that when you are talking to them, you're leading by example. And those two side by side are some of the most powerful arsenals an educator can have in any situation.
Yep.
To be able to address it on both sides, because and it's not just one or the other. It has to be both.
Right.
It has to be both. And that's kind of where I would like to see a lot more educators kind of approach that aspect.
When a kid comes up to me and they're like, Mr. Biter, not only did I learn about the periodic table, but I learned something about myself.
I'm kind of curious what they're learning about themselves.
I know, I don't know, but like it's kind of like you kind of want a kid to have, kind of that experience where they kind of like come to some realization about, themselves, or, about who they can be, or, that's what we want as teachers, I think, more so than, the content. Like, kids will finish the year, and I've had, some, co-teachers will be in my room, some aides of like, oh, this kid is never gonna pass the test or whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, if this kid makes one friend this year, that's a win. I'm like, that's my goal. It's not to get the kid to learn the science. I'm like, the goal is to get this kid a friend, because, they don't, I know this kid from, whenever, like, he doesn't make friends. So making a friend that's the kid's goal. All right. The fact he's at a third grade reading level, is not going to, necessarily change much. I can't change that much, but I can make something else about his life better for sure. Different goals. And that's, a different, subject I've talked to kids about is gauging your success and what the definition of success is, for different people. Some people consider you're not a success unless you're making money. That's not true. I don't think so. But I think a lot of stress is people will set goals and not reach them and not consider themselves successful. I don't know.
I mean, I think that's part of, like, the whole teaching, not necessarily emotional intelligence, but kind of like understanding your own, what you're capable of, and understanding what you need to do to achieve your goals. And it's always been, and I take this with me all the time, that my, like, kind of my mentor through a lot of med school and everything is always like, set achievable goals, always, with an ultimate goal that you want to get to every time. Because the thing is that, like, when you start achieving those smaller goals and those bite-sized goals, and you start to realize, when you look retroactively, how much you have done. And I take that with me at all times. And it's something that anyone, any age, any grade, any education level can take with them, is understanding that we're only human, and that we need to be much more accountable for our limitations as well.
Oh, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about refugees for a little while, because I know that's your topic as well. My school, like several, we've had a lot of refugees from Burma in particular, via Thailand. The past probably 15 years, and in particular, I had one student who was an excellent wrestler, because I'm a wrestling coach too, and I didn't find out till I was teaching him, and he came in 8th grade, didn't speak any English, and I found out later that he had been, shot in the forest. At one point he had like a bullet hole in him, and he would spend most of his days hauling bamboo. You know, and so, and you would never have known because he was just quiet and a good student. And then later I come to think, I'm like, what kind of baggage was he carrying around that no one knew about for years? um
Mhm.
and so that's one story, and there's of course lots of stories to go with this, but where I was
Mhm.
thinking of refugees coming to America, but also that trauma piece as well, that this student in particular, from what I could tell, and this is a while ago, didn't exhibit any symptoms like you would say, but man, he was a great wrestler. I mean, that he excelled at that. So maybe that was the aggression he got out.
Maybe, I mean, it
I
could
don't
be
know.
also that we had well, especially a lot, one of the greater things as well that what we see of a lot of refugee processing within the United States. So there's kind of the U.S. has a refugee admissions program, and which is managed by my bureau. And the aspects of that program is obviously individuals have to like obviously apply for asylum here, and by being admitted here, we place them in different parts of the state and places where they are willing to accept refugee populations. So I guess I'm assuming that your city probably is one of the
Yep.
many places that accepts that. So it's fantastic. That makes me happy to hear. Please write to your governor or mayor and let them know that that's a very appreciated thing, because it's a program
Yep.
that's being gutted left and right now. Sorry
Yep.
to be a little political.
Yeah, well, we had
um,
a specific church organization that we know was bringing in families, um,
Good.
that were refugees. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and I enjoy it. It's like whatever. I like it because our school is so diverse. It's a city
Sure.
school, but it is like you know diverse. It you can't is there a predominant culture or like race or anything? Not really. You could
Sure.
say. I mean, it depends on which year you're looking at. Maybe it's that's what one of the things I love about it. So, and where I teach, and so
Yeah.
I'm glad we have that, because I think kids growing up, especially now, it's good for them to have that experience of being around other people of
Mhm.
varying cultures and ethnicities and backgrounds, to kind of learn how to get along and relate and grow up together, and become friends. um,
Yeah. I would assume that in the situation there, your student might have had they're one of the lucky few that had both parents make it with them in the
mhm.
admissions program, or have had like one of the parents at least make it,
Yep.
and obviously had very good involvement. Like basically a lot of these programs too, what's great about it is that we administer programs in the local community to ensure that when they are here, we're not just dropping them off, right, and
Right.
saying good luck, have at it. We're teaching them, uh, life skills. We're teaching them, we're integrating them into society for a long haul. Like we're not, and that's a key to a successful admissions refugee program. And any sort of refugee program is reintegration into society, right? A lot of these refugee populations, in any humanitarian crisis setting, a lot of them live in tents. A lot of them, live off of like rations, and probably don't have like that great of access to sanitary conditions, or huddle together like 15 within a bunk, and all these different situations that coming here, it is a
Hmm.
huge culture shock.
Yep.
And obviously all these crisis settings can be different. It could be anything from like the Sudanese war going on, or civil war within the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or it could be genocide. It could be war, or it could be in this case, a like a hurricane that hit Mozambique recently, actually a cyclone, excuse me. These are all examples of things that could possibly affect and create a refugee situation where people are not able to go back home or just don't have a place to go. So we need to be able to have that capacity to be like, well, if you do come to this foreign country, that we're not just going to just drop you there. We're going to make sure that one, your livelihood is back in state. You're earning money, your family's earning money, your kids are going to school, you guys have a community to belong to, right? It's not just you guys. You have
Mm-hmm.
a couple of other Burmese refugee families that are here to talk you through and like teach you these things. These are all many facets of the program that we make sure to have in state when we do bring families over. So that way, in situations like what you see, where your student is integrated successfully, which makes me happy
Mm-hmm.
to hear that this individual seems pretty like set, despite what this person's probably seen. Like
Yep.
they seem pretty integrated really well, which to us, that's going back to your thing about success. That's success right there.
Right.
That's
Yep.
absolute success right there, because that they are you know living their life.
Yep. An interesting thing is, I know particularly with that culture, the Burmese culture, in is that some of the families don't want to take like assistance, like food assistance programs or things like that, because they have this pride where they don't want to have to rely on someone else. Do you find that a lot with some, cultures where like you want to give them more assistance and they're kind of like, no, we're independent. We can do it on our own. Or is that usually
Yeah,
not the
we do.
case?
Sometimes we do encounter that. It's usually much more less often in situations where they have children, because they are much more pliable at that point. They're
Mm-hmm.
willing to take the assistance if their kids are involved. But in a situation where they are still adamant about taking support, what we do is, in this kind of livelihood aspect, right? We teach them,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, okay, John and Peggy. I'm just giving their random names. We're gonna, instead of just giving you a handout, we're going to teach you how to get a job, and you do it on your own, or we teach you how to contribute to part of the society, right? Because the thing is that pride is very much real. We want to make sure that they don't feel like they are just getting handouts, that they are homeless, that they are impoverished. We want to give them a sense of belonging and a sense of that their life is back to normal, that they are earning their keep. And part of the challenge right there is ensuring that once they're here, that like I said, we're not just giving them blank checks and saying,
Right.
go to your local Safeway and have at it. We're going and teaching them, okay, well, I noticed that Jane here is a seamstress. Let's get you employed in this local clothing store and have you start hemming clothes. And I noticed, John, you are, you I'm just making something up here, like you're a farmer in your past life. Let's get you more involved with like kind of like the agricultural aspects of this
Mm-hmm.
city here, and all of these different things. But the thing is that like this is part of the whole. This is why the admissions program is so critical, because we evaluate on it every case by case basis for individual to ensure that when they do come here, that they're not just a bump on the log,
Right.
that they're not just simply getting handouts, which is one of the many misconceptions about our program, is that these refugees come here and they're just sucking up taxpayers' money. Highly not the case. They're contributing members of society, and they are integral part of a lot of different cities, and take blue collar jobs that not many people are willing to take. And that's kind of been a lot of the stuff that we do when we bring them over, is that we do that. Sometimes if they don't have a skill set, we teach it. Where it's like, okay, well, it doesn't seem like you have a skill set. Let's teach you how to repair electrical systems, or repair HVAC
Mm-hmm.
systems, or do construction. And these are all little things that we can do to help like foster sustainable livelihood for these refugee populations.
Right. And one of the things, I found, frustrating sometimes is, why, we, as a community, we spent time with, certain kids, and then, you know, they'll go with like a parent back to their home country and then not come back. Like, I know I had a
Mhm.
student that went back to Yemen. I'm like, what are you doing? You're going to a country that is like, in an awful state. I get that, you're uncle's getting married, I'm like, but I hope to see you again, kind of thing. It's, for an educator, that it kind of breaks your heart, when something like that happens, because you know you don't know, once, it's hard enough to get to America, to
Mhm.
leave, especially now, with COVID and with the administration we have. You get out, you might not get back in. Um, right now, you probably couldn't get
Yeah,
out because they wouldn't take you, but because you're coming from
yeah,
America.
yeah.
But
No, I mean that's true. I mean it's a very big challenge we run into with a lot of these reintegration uh, practices that we have, right? Where someone does want to go back to their home country. We offer opportunities for that, but I mean, in situations like Yemen or like Libya or Sudan, or some of the places with high conflicts and stuff like that,
mhm,
I mean, the thing is always, and it's something I always stress to anyone who's very new to the whole refugee situation, is don't underestimate the power of belonging to home in
yeah,
your home country. It does not if you're in a foreign soil and you're just having to get your bearings and everything, like it's just a lot of these countrymen, like they want to go back home in a better context setting, obviously. And it's one of the many issues we see in a lot of the Rohingya crisis right now within Bangladesh.
yep,
We have a lot of the Burmese population, the Rohingyans, excuse me. Essentially, the refugee population has holed up in Bangladesh, and one of the bigger issues that we have run into is like Myanmar is willing to bring him back, but because of the civil war and a lot of the political unrest, they're very unwilling to. So it's very hard, despite the government's like pushing them, saying the Bangladesh government's like pushing them, saying, "Well, it's safe there now. Why won't you go?" And they're like, "We want to, but it's just not safe for us." And um,
hmm
there's a lot of complexities and challenges when it runs into these different refugee situations, and some of them are easier, right? A success story we can say right now that I could say within my lifetime is obviously the country of Burundi and Tanzania. We've seen a lot of Burundians who were refugees in the country of Tanzania are slowly being reintegrated back
hmm
to Burundi right now, and this is something that we rarely see. And it's one of the many things that people don't understand too about this situation is that a lot of our refugee situations are protracted situations. And what that means is that essentially it's like populations of 25,000 or more that have been refugees for more than 5 years. And a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in global context are protracted situations, which
right,
is not good news, right? Because basically you just have these refugee camps that are set up all over the world, different countries and different nationalities, different
hmm
religions, and we don't know what to do with them.
right,
Situations like in your city where you have families being brought in and being reintegrated is one of the best things we can do within our current capacity, short of bringing them back to their home country, right?
right.
But anyone who studies world international relations or understands a lot of stuff that's going on worldwide, excuse my French, it's a bit of a shithole. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, and even more exacerbated by COVID,
Right.
more so than ever. And it's one of the realities that we have to always think about. It's one of the many things that it's very critical, like where cities like yours, where you do host refugee populations, that we reinforce our local legislators and local governments to continue fostering that program to ensure that the admission program stays alive. Because I can tell you right now that this administration, they would love nothing to just gut it completely and not accept any refugees.
Oh, I believe
Which
that.
yeah, I mean, I
But
don't need to say anymore, but I mean, like, it's
yeah,
just these this is the reality of like what we're
hmm
seeing right now in a lot of these developing nations. It's not just the U.S. Um, we're seeing that within the UK. We're seeing that within Australia. We're seeing that in a lot of the G20 countries. So it's just one of the harsher things we need to think about for the long term goal for refugees.
Yeah, and it's hard to think of any real good solutions for a lot of these, like the Rohingya one coming up
Hmm.
anytime soon. Unfortunately, um,
Yeah.
it like you said, protracted, and most conflict zones are protracted. It's not like a lot of these things solve themselves within a year or 2 years, or 3 years. Um,
Hmm.
it goes on for a really long time. If you think of how long, certain dictators have been in power in some countries where it's awful for certain populations to live there,
Right.
of certain religions, that dictator's been there for 20 years. It's it's been miserable for that population for that long. Um,
Right.
you know, it it doesn't stop anytime soon. So to think that after a year or 2 years that you know people will just be able to go back, I think is unrealistic. Um,
It's true. It's true. We've been the in terms of like documentation for the Rohingya crisis. I don't think we. I think we started first observing cases of Rohingya refugees starting in 1990.
mhm.
So that tells you just how long
Right.
this has been going on. Um, that it's not something that is an easy solution. Anyone who tells you it's an easy solution to all of this, I would really love to hear your proposal. I would love
Well,
to, and I'm sure Congress would love to hear your proposal as well.
exactly. Well, I'm sure that's what the refugees are thinking as far as, oh, they're in Bangladesh and they're like, oh yeah, we can go back, but what's going to change? In another year, we force out again. Because it's always these back and forth, movements of people, and that's what it is. Um,
Hmm.
so uh, I am blessed where I am, um, and do what I can in my position as a teacher when I have these students. But
Hmm.
otherwise, not much I can do. Write your congressman and vote, I guess, is something we can do as American citizens, um, to try to help where we
Hmm.
can. Um, you want to move on to science and communication for a little bit because I know it's getting late, but we haven't touched on that yet. So,
Sure,
uh,
sure.
you know, science communication, something else I know that you're into. I'll say I didn't realize, I was a science educator. I didn't realize that scicomm, science communication was such a thing until probably a few years ago. And I came across the scicomm, on Twitter, and I'm kind of like, wow, there's a lot of people that their entire life is just communicating science. Because I knew there's like, science journalism and media, but I didn't realize there
Yeah,
was a specific all encompassing science communication thing. Um,
sure.
and I thought I had a pretty good background in science, but I was like, oh, I learned something. Um, so, kind of like you asked me what my definition of trauma was. What's your definition of science communication?
So, science communication in its basic essence is you are communicating scientific principles, scientific concepts um, to the public awareness and a public engine for that. So that could be in any, you know, field and any field, any media in general. So I know a lot of people they'll have scicomm in Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
There's scicoms who do Netflix specials or through books. Through Twitch is one of the bigger examples that recently I've been kind of getting involved in as of late. Um, but the idea is for me, and I know some of my colleagues will, and if you are in chat, you're welcome to pipe up and say, I disagree with you, and we can happily have that conversation. But in general, for SciComm, it is a responsibility of the SciComm individual to communicate a lot of these more complex scientific principles and concepts so that so that anyone who listens to you can pick it up or at least like be interested enough to be able kind of to pick up the topic. Um, why we're seeing this within the past few years, and I was kind of doing some digging around this, why we're starting to see this within the past few years is that we're starting to see a crisis right now within our own within our own country right now, where science is kind of being is in jeopardy right now,
Yep.
where our science is being questioned every step along the way, and people do not believe in empirically based research, or just in terms of like verifying and validating information. And I think what's happening is that scicomm is kind of picking up that mantle right now, where we're trying to talk to the average Joe, average Jane about, and physics, who's in chat right now, he's talking about like complex quantum theory, but he's able to break it in a way that like he can, like, if someone were to ask a question, that he's able to like he's able to do his best to kind of like, draw out that map and say, here are the concepts that kind of guide what I'm talking about, and here is how, and he breaks it down, right? And that is, to me, the basic principle of science communication. Is that you're basically not educating, because I don't want to say, because you're not exactly giving them homework, you're not giving them a syllabus, you're not, you're essentially giving them the information to go off and do their own research and do their own like thinking on the topic.
Right.
And so situations like these right now, where reason why I got into it actually was because of COVID. I was formerly a purely 100% video game streamer. That's all I streamed but for a good 3 years. And I would say within the past year and a half or so, I started getting into science communication, because I started realizing that one, I had a subject matter expertise, and two, that I was able to reach a lot broader audience with topics such as COVID, where if and I know a lot of people in chat, and you have seen this, is that misinformation has run rampant.
Oh yeah.
It has run rampant, and it has hit home for a lot of people. And it's the job actually of us to make sure that we are communicating the right information, or that we're pointing people in the right information venue, and that we're arming people to figure out what is misinformation or not. And that's right there. That's I think that's like kind of where I see for scicomm coming in.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason I like doing some of the education piece, as a teacher, of course, but also on Twitch, is kids aren't getting their news from the radio, or a lot of those media that were traditional media, the newspaper or TV. They're getting it through their Instagram feed, or a Twitter feed or something else, and it's prone to so many biases, including confirmation bias in particular. And I always think, go to where the kids are. If you want to reach them and you want to affect their world, you kind of have to step into it. And Twitch is part of that, since it's a much more youthful place. You're going to more likely reach a younger audience, especially, we're talking earlier, what channels to be in, like just chatting versus science and tech. Go to the ones where there are, where the youth is that you can reach. And, if you publish something in a newspaper, a kid might see it if it comes across their, their feed of whatever their social media is. But, that's about it. And so I think part of that, it's not like when we were kids, we sat around reading the newspaper on a Sunday morning. But, when I was a kid, the TV would be on and my parents would be watching the news, and I would be in the room doing homework or whatever. Right. So it was kind of there, but now it's very insulated maybe. And so I think communicating science, particularly current event type things, as it's kind of in an area where we're kind of trying to figure it out still. I don't know if that's fair, or it seemed really cut and dry before, but now it's really tough. And misinformation has gotten so much better.
It has.
It's so easy to fool people in a way. I tell kids that you learn science, you can learn how to be a BS detector. You can You can try to figure out when someone's trying to pull something over on you. But if you don't want, if you like living in ignorance, then, you can't, it's hard to, fix that. And so I think science has always struggled. I mean, there are schools still where it's tough to teach evolution at all in this country, which is, still boggles my mind. And you wonder why we have trouble getting good information out about COVID, a disease that could evolve. Well, if you're never teaching evolution, it's no wonder that people don't understand how disease works. And so I think there's, there, I don't know if there's, obviously, a fundamental flaw in the American psyche in a way, where it's coming to roost in a way where we've had poor science education to some degree for a while. And now it's kind of showing up. I mean, is that fair? I mean, I'm a science teacher, and that's kind of, where I'm coming from.
So this is something I coined on my own, where I said that what COVID presents as a very unique situation is that it's a very emotional crisis, because of the fact that it affects everyone, anyone, anywhere, and people are out. Everyone is out of their comfort zones, right? People are not going to school. People are not able to go to movie theaters or hang out with their friends like they used to. People are, conventions are canceled. A lot of things that we took for granted are right now gone in the, within a snap, and is caused a lot of people to reach out. And this is where misinformation thrives at its best, is people reach out for the most convenient information. And sometimes that information is not exactly accurate, or it's not exactly in its best interest of the general public. And and obviously there's political motivations and stuff like that as well. But so we're starting to see a lot of that be the primary motivator to a lot of situations we're seeing, with a lot of misinformation being sprung up. But an example that actually I was going to mention was, like, recently I talked with an individual from my Discord community. There is a vaccine development right now with an AstraZeneca in Oxford. It's one of the more prominent ones. It recently stopped. It halted its vaccine trial because there was an unknown illness that came up, and they had to halt it. Now, surface level, what I call the abstract readers, everyone's going to look at the headlines and say, oh my God, it's because this vaccine is terrible. This vaccine is going to cause issues. And oh my God, this vaccine is never going to be developed. And it was panic mongering, right? Because people just saw halted vaccine development. However, when you actually have someone, and some people on Twitter started, tweeting out like, hey, this is normal during the process of vaccine development, during the human clinical trials. We want to make sure that if something does come up, that we investigate all side effects, because that's part of good science, is that it's rigorous, it's very methodical, and we document everything. And that's an example of, obviously, a potential misinformation happening, and science communication coming in, because people with our expertise came in and said, no, this is actually within parameters of what we understand to be vaccine development processes, and this is how this is actually a good thing that this is happening right now, and we're addressing it right at the get-go. And but obviously there's a lot of other factors which we won't get into. Right. But I think that the part of it is, like, it's not about educating, but it's about ensuring that we are, we stop misinformation in its tracks.
Right.
So,
well, I think part of it's education, as far as, because I know one of the things that's happened with COVID as well is it was so unknown that some of the guidelines changed throughout the whole process, from March, or even before then, all the way through now, as far as what helps and what doesn't. How good are masks? What are the better masks? How good is your hand washing? How long does it live on surfaces? And as we learned more about it, we could then, or the CDC and others could make recommendations that are more pointed, but some media outlets were like, why can't scientists decide? Why they're changing their minds again? And it's like, you don't understand how science works. You're changing it based on better evidence that we're presenting. It's similar to what you're talking about as far as vaccines and how vaccines work. If us science teachers did a better job of explaining how science works, how it is rigorous and repeatable, and we change based on new evidence, then fewer people would have this confusion or angst, or even when it comes to getting different recommendations as we learn new things. I found that kind of interesting, that people would get upset that things would change. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, things do change. I mean, we don't do surgeries the same now as we did in 1850 for a reason. We learned and we changed how we do things. So I do think there's some bit of the education in there, to be
Absolutely, yeah.
to have that bit of science literacy, to understand at a basic level of how science works. And I'm always learning a lot about how things work, because I've never taken a drug through all the trials. I'm not, that's not my degree field. But I enjoy learning that, but I understand the basics of random controlled trials and things like that, which is a very, I know from experience, difficult to teach. Because there's a lot of vocabulary within that. There's random, what does that mean? Controlled, what does that mean? Trial, what exactly is that? There's so many pieces. There's independent variables, dependent variables, and it's tough to teach that, because, like I said, there is that very content-specific vocabulary, but it's really important to learn. And I don't think, personally, I try really hard to teach it well, and I always think I fail. But and I always hope that our 8th grade they'll get a certain amount of it, but you should, in science classes, then get it again in 9th grade, get it again in 10th grade, and on. And by the time you graduate high school, what an experiment is, a controlled experiment in particular, which is the basis for the development of medicines. But I don't think a lot of people have that knowledge. I mean, there's plenty of people that drop out in high school that never got that understanding. And I think that's compounded by, you're familiar with the article, but there was, I read somewhere that most articles on coronavirus and COVID were written at like the high school or college level, which, as you said, the average Joe would have trouble deciphering, the meaning, so I don't know where to go from there as far as, what's the answer to that?
I mean, from that perspective, at that point, is that this is where the scientific community, not just scicomm, it's the scientific, it's the job of the scientific community and the government and public health officials to ensure that there's a consistent one voice message across the board. That's something that has been missing throughout this whole pandemic. We've never had a unified voice. We had state-by-state legislation. We had state-by-state policies, county-by-county policies, and it's been inconsistent. Anyone who has actually done anything with a pandemic playbook will tell you that that's a recipe for disaster, and it's what we're seeing right now. Right, in this case, is that we are observing inconsistent policies across the board, and our inability to control the infection right now within the United States. States that were one day able to contain the virus, or at a stage that they said that they were, are now not able to, because the people move, things get travel across the border, and things all like life still goes on, and there's so many complexities and variability within how uh, we as humans function in a population setting that
Hmm.
it makes for dealing with a virus like this, which has high infectability rate, very unpredictable. And it's why we always, and I know that everyone hears this constantly over and over again. It's like to socially distant, to make sure you wear your mask, to wash your hands constantly, and
Hmm.
obviously contact tracing, and to ensure that we're scaling up testing. Because until we get this under control, um, and I've already said this to everyone. We're not going to see any sort of like return to normalcy until mid 2022, maybe, and that's being optimistic. I'm going to be honest,
Hmm.
based on just how we are handling things right now. I don't have faith that we will handle a vaccination strategy here consistently across the board. Um,
Hmm.
we're we have a lot of gaps to fill with more some of the vulnerable populations at home here in the states.
Yeah.
So
Another interesting thing, my wife asked me, and she was like, "Where are those public awareness campaigns that you would see back in the day? Where when we were kids, it's always like, don't drown your food, and they'd have some awareness camp, turn your pot handles in, kids. Where are those now on TV, where it's like you have some celebrity come out and be like, wear your mask and wash your hands, supported
mhm.
by the U.S. government, Department of whatever, you know, and I think that's part of the
Yeah.
science communication that it would be there, if that's what I feel that there should have been, where like, all right, I turn on YouTube and the advertisement is, hey, make sure that you wash your hands and you wear your mask today, everybody. Brought to you by, you know, your favorite YouTuber, The Beast, or whatever. And,
Yeah.
it, I think that's piece. It's not science communication as far as content, but it's communication as far as, a public awareness, which
Well,
I
this is yeah.
you
What you're
know,
describing right now is a public health is a public health thing, right?
oh
Where
yeah, yeah,
there needs to be a consistent, like, that one voice aspect of ensuring that we are communicating across the board. What your wife was mentioning about, like, I guess, like, let's do the drug,
right,
even though it wasn't
exactly,
a very successful campaign.
right.
But the
Say
idea is
say
that,
no
like,
to drugs. Yep.
but the thing is that, like, that message was seen everywhere on every state and every county. No one, there was not like there was not a gap, right? But what
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing here right now is that some counties, you see some counties where they're like, oh well, we're opening everything back up and we don't care, don't wear a mask, it doesn't really matter, we're not really
Mm-hmm.
enforcing it. And some places are like, I'm in New York City right now, where
Yep.
we are just getting to a point where I think end of September, where we're opening at all indoor dining at 25% capacity, which is huge, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first moved here, there was none. You couldn't even go indoors and eat. Everything was delivered and all that other stuff.
Oh
So
yeah.
that inconsistency, what you see right there,
Yep.
is not an ideal setting for a robust global public health setting, really, for any pandemics.
Right.
So,
Right. So, as far as science communication, you're saying that a
mhm,
lot of that, it starts from the top, wherever that is,
mhm,
in this case, especially with COVID. Um, I think a lot of science com that I'm seeing is also generated from grassroots, from the bottom
yeah,
as well, which it also has its own place, as far as being innovative and coming up with new ways of presenting science content, kind of like what you've done on your stream and other people have done on their streams on Twitch. That's that grassroots innovative, you know, communicating science to the public, as well.
mhm.
So it is 10 o'clock. I want to give some chance for last thoughts before we finish up here. I see Teresa's here. Thanks for joining us here at the end. Just looking at the chat. Kazimov is here. One of my local Facebook groups, some people are calling for a burning of their masks. Great. right. That's what we want to hear. That terrifies me in more than one way. So any last words before we finish up here tonight? So you can get your well-needed sleep, and I can get mine as well, because I still have to go to work and teach tomorrow.
I guess part of the thing is so several things, right? I mean, we talked about several big topics. We talked about trauma, so I'll start with trauma. It's important to really understand. I would say, really reach out to different resources and everything. And I know, Scott, you've got a really great resource right there for a lot of folks who might be interested about how we deal with trauma. Trauma happens to everyone at any time, at any age, anywhere. So educating us in terms of just not just for students, but it's also for adults as well. For the refugee situation right there, find out what your state and county are doing to support refugee admissions. If they are not, write to your local legislator, or write to your local government and say, hey, we should look into a program is there a program available to bring in admissions for refugees? Because I can tell you right now that until there's a consistent voice across the board between all the different counties and state, we're not going to get anything done. And obviously vote. Always vote. And I know everyone's going to be hearing that nonstop for the next 2 months. So, and
yep.
For scicomm in general, I know there's a lot of scicomm folks here who are right now in chat right now, but I say to anyone who is really interested in going into scicomm, or is really interested in learning more about scicomm, really check out the knowledge, TKF. We got a lot of streamers in there who focus on science communication, but also understanding, if you want to kind of get involved with it yourself, start with addressing misinformation. Always ask for sources, and always ask for TLDRs about anything. It's something that I instituted recently in my Discord, because people were just posting random scientific journal articles without any sort of background on the topic. And I finally got to a point where I was like, stop, tell me what you read. Why is it significant? What are the limitations, et cetera, et cetera. And people started realizing that they were just reading the abstract and not reading the rest of the paper. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that we need to be a lot more vigilant about, is being better data stewards and being better information stewards. But that's right there, I can tell you right now, will speed up essentially what we're doing here in the scientific communication world, that we are helping everyone better understand these concepts on their own. And we're arming individuals with good concepts and good foundation to go out on their own. So that's kind of my closeout message.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree with that. About one of the first things you can do is, kind of verify what you post on social media. So, don't, I can't criticize my own students for, just believing whatever they say on social media if I do it as well. I have to be, the first critic. And I think that comes to on Twitter, right? You just can't, retweet an article that you think you like. You actually have to read it and see if, it's actually legit, or if what the issues are with it, because I know that, if I see someone retweet something, I'm like, I know you didn't just read that and retweet it, because this is garbage. So I think, as far as, science educators and science, common the same way, read what you post, make sure you understand what it's talking about, and those limitations, like you said, of that research that you're posting or that article that you posted. I got off of Facebook mainly because of all the garbage that was on there, and I was tired of correcting my friends and family. Like, a blue moon is really not that rare. Okay.
Yeah.
Things like that.
I distanced myself ages ago. It's a good step. It's a good step right there.
But, yep. So, well, thank you so much for being here, Neuro. I appreciate you having this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot tonight. I hope everyone else that was here learned a lot. and they'll check out your Twitter, your Twitch when you're actually on there. And you got something next week. I have Professor Stan Sessions. Dr. Sessions will be here. We're going to talk the scientific method, as well as albino cave salamanders. So so that'll be a fun chat as well to be part of. And we got a raid earlier, so we're gonna raid a fellow TKF. Lantern Noir is streaming. I believe he's playing Red Dead Redemption as usual. So we will go ahead. Please stick around. We'll raid him. He'll be thrilled to see everyone. I'm not sure who he's with tonight that he's going to be raiding, but that we're going to raid with him. But that'll be fun. So thank you, everyone. Hang out. Stop in the next time. I will be streaming Friday again too. I'm not sure what I'll be playing Friday. Maybe I'll be a science game of some kind, probably.
That's always a good choice.
That's my Fridays, science games. So here we go. Ooh.
Alrighty.
All right.
You survived.
Yep. Survival.
How'd you think it went?
Good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Pretty good.
All right.
All right. It's hard to gauge. I've only been doing these chats for like a month, so a little over a month. So, but I keep doing them because they're the more popular streams I have, and I have a fun time doing it myself. I really enjoy it. So if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. So
I think that's the best way to do it. Well, thank you again for having me. I appreciate it, man. I will let you get going so you can get your well-deserved sleep.
You too. I'll see you around on TKF and on Twitter.
Yep, I will do so. Take it easy, man.
All right, bye.
See ya.
Of your telehealth? They love yous.
Nobody said I was bubbly.
Yeah, they start listening close enough.
They said I was helpful and nice.
Hello.
and knowledgeable.
Well, we play a variety of games. We talk history, we talk biology, we talk whatever she wants to talk because I'm too polite to interrupt her.
What? You're the one who does all the talking.
Well, I'm the
Yeah,
conduit
blabbermouth.
between chat and her. So I have to do something. So then if you catch us in the afternoon, you also catch my little bit. She is really taking to being an amateur streamer. I keep waiting for her to tell me she needs a better mic. Because that day is coming. So
Oh yeah, I'm sure it is.
we're just going to do a little bit of a delivery here. We're actually on the back end of our session. Because I'm already getting a little winded and I got to be up in the morning to greet my students. We are back. Feed up Crips the Rough Rider here.
Supplies are starting to run low, just so you know.
Yeah, I know. Nope. I'm just ordering supplies. I'm not taking the time. And thank you for the birthday wishes. Appreciate it. According to the actuaries, I have progressed 60% through life at this stage. And gosh, I love that number.
I don't know why you love that
I don't know
number
why
so
I love
much.
it either. I think you know what it is? It's just such a pretty round number. You know? 60%. And it doesn't sound like I'm as old as I feel most of the time. Because that's not that much more than 50%. And you really think about it, you know, it's only 10% more than 50%. So I'm like just barely past the halfway mark. Well, it's 60.8, I think. So technically we're supposed to round it to 61, but I'm keeping the 60. 60% it is. Which, by the way, I'm not going to put it up now, but if you ever look up Life Casually Explained, it is one of the most brilliant bits of animation I've come across. He does a lot of really neat, fun videos like that. But are you ready to roll out, by the way, hon?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Let's go deliver this. It's not completely full, but it's still pretty far up there.
Get him.
It's a chunk of change.
Time to make some money.
Yeah, that's what I need. Some change.
Sure feels good. It was. I've cut myself so many times.
Still,
Excuse me.
just up pennies.
Blood left in me.
Hey, they add up.
Anyway, got a local buyer lined up, so should be an easy run for you.
He says this will be easy. Oh, look. Fog.
Because we're delivering.
Come on. Come
We're
around.
already rolling.
Come around. I'm not exactly sure why Cripps loaded the wagon and pointed it off a cliff.
Because that's what he likes to do here.
Yeah, and then I have to drive it all
Oh,
the way
there's the wagon.
through camp at camp
That's a
speeds.
cliff over there,
There's
too,
a cliff
you know.
over there too. Well, how do I get down?
Right. Not here.
Okay.
Maybe here.
I'm gonna keep going this way and be optimistic that there's a way down that's not a cliff.
Okay, because this is cliff.
That looks like cliff. Oh wait, nope, I can get down this.
Okay. Oh, yep, you can.
Okay. Jeez, criminies. I have got to talk about him, about that, where he loads the wagon up, because this is a little nuts.
Look at all the ducks.
Okay, there's the
cool
road.
duck.
I got a road.
By riding over. Found a road?
Found a road.
Where? I don't see it.
Found a
Oh.
road.
There it is.
Oh, that is a terrible camp for this. Oh, and I was saying earlier,
Maybe we'll luck out and nobody will be able to find us in the fog.
maybe. I have a guest booked for next week. I have to lock down the day that we're going to do it, but the director of the Frankenmuth Historical Museum wants to come on and talk about some history with us. Which will be fun, because Frankenmuth as a community is a lot like some of the little towns here in game. So it's a good chance to kind of double dip her city history with the history we see around us here.
Mm-hmm.
She's already a little bit...
And at one point, Frankenmuth was the far west.
Mm-hmm.
Not by this time, but it was a frontier at one point.
It was. Well, actually, in 1899, it was still pretty frontiery.
Was it?
Yeah. It was actually, in 1899, it was a lot more like a Valentine or a Strawberry than a Blackwater.
Huh.
In fact,
So it was a northern frontier rather than a western frontier.
Mm-hmm. Another point that's going to be fun to talk about is that she commented that when Reverend Cowden was on, he said that usually the churches were on the outskirts of town, so you'd have to all journey out to services. Frankenmuth was literally built around the church.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because wasn't it a religious community?
Mm-hmm.
Or like a... Not a, like... I mean, most of the towns had religion of some kind, but... I'm trying to remember, because we went there to the museum, and I should know this.
Well, there's kind of an interesting, like, Mayflower-esque story to it, too, where they embarked from Pennsylvania, and they came up the lakes.
That's right.
And then they settled on the beaches of Lake Huron. halfway up the Michigan Peninsula. So,
That's right.
yeah, it's a really neat. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a fun conversation. Might get a little awkward when we have a frank talk about the odds that a teenage Irish Catholic would fit in. But I think that's the kind of tough conversation you have to have. You know, let's be honest about where we all were at the time.
Okay.
All right, I'm just gonna drive this sucker in and then head for cover.
Okay.
I'm really wishing I still had my dynamite now. As these guys come out, they usually are hiding in that barn.
Ah!
Okay, I'm gonna find some cover.
All right. Oh, that's right.
Cause here they come. Not mean to grab this rifle.
I didn't mean to shoot the horse. Oh, they're coming out on this side now too. They're in all the barns. These guys are so much easier to deal with than the revenue agents. There he is.
Right. And that's it.
That was surprisingly effective.
Well, yeah, they're way easier than revenue agents. Oh!
Whoa, jeez. Hello, train.
Mind the gap.
Something like that.
Okay, I got in me for one more. Do you want to knock out a mission for the boy since he's right here?
I was gonna say let's deliver some moonshine if you got a buyer, but okay.
Oh, do you need to do 2 moonshine deliveries?
Well, I don't know if I'll get that. Let's do the boy.
Okay.
I thought you did the boy already.
We did not do the boy. We were talking about doing one of his missions, and then you hopped on, and then we abandoned that.
Ah,
So see if he's
Yeah,
got
let's do
something
it.
for us. He's over on the other part of town here.
okay.
Of course, we might be too
Wait,
well
isn't that gonna
behaved.
make us? I was gonna say, wait, isn't he a
He's
little bit on the other side?
he's
of the
he's there
law?
standing for Billy the Kid. Hey Sonic, welcome back. Oh, I'm overdue to do this. Hang on, let me get in here real quick.
Yeah, I might have to go shoot up the town a little bit or something.
And if you are not already following these wonderful people, you absolutely have to follow them. And then just because I don't want anyone to feel left out, there we go. Those are some amazing people, Sonic in particular and Nebula both, and Science Stream Scott there has been a great friend, helping me get into this
I
hobby.
should say thank you. You actually managed to do something for me.
What a little punk.
Of course you do.
What a
I mean, you
punk.
shine my boots if I asked you to. Do anything I say, right, Lackey? This is a jailbreak. Out the lockup in Valentine. Old Roy got caught, so old Roy needs saving. You can do that, can't you?
Oh dear.
Moral of the story is don't get caught, ain't it? And hope you got a friend like the boy here. Go and get him.
Oh dear.
Uh-oh.
Oh dear.
A jailbreak,
A jailbreak. We're going to be shooting a lot of people don't deserve it.
Oh, we got a lot of horse grooming coming in our future.
Yep.
I think I like my horse.
Yep. Feed your horse well. Yeah, no, it's happy to do it. Happy to send people your way. A lot of my fun has been being part of these communities, and that's part of the fun of it. Is making sure everyone knows what's up.
Decreased my honor just talking to him.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully something comes from this. Yay!
We got 16 minutes to get him out of jail.
Well, it looks like you have 16 minutes to get him out of jail.
Are you stuck?
I am stuck in a loading screen.
Oh, great.
What a crappy way to end the night.
Enter the sheriff's office.
Yep. Everyone's treated to just
Alright.
my ugly mug sitting here, waiting for something interesting to happen. You're gonna have to.
Whoa! Hey! Oh no. I just shot the sheriff.
Ooh, did you shoot the deputy?
I don't know. Where do I get? How do I? Where is he? Where's the guy? I gotta get out. Okay, there he is. Unlock the jail cell. Well, how do I unlock the jail cell?
Shoot the lock?
There we go. Oh, there we go.
I'm gonna start the.
Maybe I shouldn't have taken the keys.
Yeah.
All right, come on.
I'm gonna have to completely nuke
Get
this
you out of
orbit.
here. I'm escorting the prisoner. Come on.
What a horrible twist of fate tonight.
Come on. Where are you going?
He's jailbreaking, isn't he?
I know he's going the other way.
Why is he? Well,
Oh, I just shot that guy in the head.
the guy you're trying to save?
No.
Oh, good.
Where'd he go? Where's the guy? Where's the guy I'm escorting? He disappeared. Where did he go? I'm so confused. He ran out the back door and disappeared.
He disappeared on you?
Yeah, like he went out the back door, and then the deputy came in and I shot him, and then I went out the door and the guy was gone.
That's not
and then the
good.
music stopped. Yeah, I think.
Oh, you know what did it?
What?
I should have waited because I think when I quit out, it ended the mission.
Oh.
That's what may have done it. So we should meet back in.
Okay.
We should meet back in Valentine. You should be the posse leader. We should try another mission for the boy,
Okay.
if it'll let us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and here's the funny thing, Scott, is that this game is janky as all get out. The bugs are like, I mean,
Where's the boy?
he's on the outskirts of Valentine.
Oh, nope, he's gone.
He's grayed out to you.
He's not on my map. I don't even see him.
He might be somewhere else for you then. Kind of scan around. The bugs are kind of, yeah. These are bugs that even like New York City cockroaches would not approach.
Where else might he be?
One of the train stations maybe?
Stranger.
It is a great game.
Because I don't think I've done any. That's Alden. Oh, there he is at Flatneck Station. And he's grayed out.
He's grayed out.
Yep.
That is such a pile of crud. Because he's grayed out for the rest of the day now because we attempted his mission.
Yep.
Okay. Where's my shack? My moonshine shack is in West Hanover.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to do another moonshine delivery. Or we can do... We can attempt one of the story missions. I'm open to any one thing you want to do to round the night out.
Let's deliver some more moonshine.
All right. I should have moonshine ready
I want to make
deliver.
some money.
If I ever finish the loading screen. Oh no, I'm in the loading screen without the spinning guns now. I'm in the dead loading screen.
Oh.
I'm in the locked up loading screen. Yep. Good night, man. It was good. Thank you for the raid. Thank you so much. As Nev would say, thank you. For bringing everybody in. and introducing a few people that might not have popped in, and bring in the people who already know me to come say hi and wish me a happy birthday. I appreciate it. Alright, I'm going back out to the main screen, quitting again. Honey, I love you.